Hello, Seiiti Arata. There is one skill that can improve your relationships and your career. And this skill is called assertive communication. You know those people who speak clearly and they know what they want, who are not aggressive and not too passive when they speak. There are people who master assertive communication, and if you don't speak naturally this way, no problem, you can learn here. Your communication needs to be clear and firm, but always kind. Assertiveness does not mean aggression. Some people confuse assertive communication with aggressive communication. They think that they should be speaking loudly and speaking harshly. That would be a necessary condition for them to be understood. But the goal of assertive communication is to get along well with people. You assert your position firmly and clearly, but without aggression. And there is a technique for doing this. Even if you believe that you were born without the gift of eloquence, you can learn. So let's go to the first point. Before any conversation, you need to determine in your mind what your goal is. With this goal in mind, study up to master the subject of the conversation. And this preparation is essential because it avoids you talking nonsense or getting emotional or losing a reason during the conversation. If necessary, prepare your arguments in writing. For example, in a professional conversation, it would be useful to note some statistical data, some regulations. This can prevent you from being caught off guard by any unexpected question. This preparation doesn't need to be a formal thesis, a lengthy study. The important thing here is to prepare what you're going to say, anticipate the questions that will probably be asked, and have clarity about your position. There are various types of assertiveness. You should use each one at the right time. Communication experts divide assertive communication into several types, from the most basic to the most advanced. And these modalities have elements such as objectivity, precision, respect, clarity. Basic assertiveness is when you recognize a situation and then you communicate what you want to say. For example, imagine a person who's disappointed with an architectural project. The person would like to remove a pillar, but then the architect says it's not possible. To explain the situation, the architect can use some basic assertiveness by saying, oh, look, I understand you don't like the pillar, but when we study the structure of the house, we discovered that the pillar is essential to maintain the stability of the construction. Let me show you here the floor plan of the house and explain to you what could happen if the pillar is removed. If basic assertiveness doesn't work, then you can use some escalated assertiveness, especially when it comes to saying no. Continuing with the same example, the architect would take a firmer position and say, as I explained before, removing the pillar makes the structure of the house less stable, and that is dangerous. You can seek a second opinion if you want. If the conversation becomes a direct confrontation, when someone says or does something contradictory, that is the time to use the third type of assertiveness. You need to explain, point out what is being contradictory, and clarify, try to understand what the intention of the other person, the real intention was. Another type of assertiveness is the I message. This happens when you take responsibility, when you speak about how you feel. This type of assertiveness, of this communication, is very productive because then you can open up to the other person. You can create a positive, a trusting relationship. For example, imagine that a coworker ignores a request from you. You can use the I message. You can start the conversation by saying something like, I feel bad when I give you a task and you don't do what I asked. I feel that my work is disrespected. So I ask that this won't happen again, otherwise we won't be able to work together anymore. Finally, there is the repetition assertiveness. Some people call this the broken record technique. That's when you say what you're going to say, then you actually say it, and finally you repeat what you just said. Before using your assertiveness to speak, learn to listen. So many materials on assertiveness, assertive communication, they focus on what you should say or how should you express yourself. But before learning to speak, you need to learn to listen. To be a good listener, it is ideal that you put yourself in the shoes of the other person. What are their ideas? What do they want? What are they saying with attitudes, but not necessarily expressing using words? You can only get answers to these questions if you listen attentively. Don't try to mentally respond or rebut everything that the other person is saying. Remember that you already did your preparation beforehand. Now is the time to listen. Pay attention to what the other person is saying, but also to what they don't say. Observe the other person's body language. Wait for them to finish speaking, and even leave a little bit of a space of silence to see if they will say or they speak something else. Only after preparation and listening to the other person should then you use your assertiveness to mark your position. When speaking, be as clear as possible. Never assume that people will understand what is in your head. One of the big problems with communication is thinking that people understand us, that they think like us. The truth is that people can understand the same situation, the same subject in completely different ways. For assertive communication, you must assume that people are not on the same page as you. They don't understand what you're just trying to say. That is why you need to be as clear as possible. Choose words that are not ambiguous. Repeat what you said. Give examples. In the end, ask what the person understood to check if they understood what you said. If you think that they didn't understand, then you explain again and ask one more time for them to explain what they understood. But do this in a kind way, without insinuating that others are stupid. Because if people feel disrespected, then your effort to communicate can be wasted. Excessive emotion destroys assertive communication. If the conversation gets too emotional, stop and regain reason. We like to think of ourselves as rational animals, but emotions guide so much of what we do, what we say. The problem occurs when emotion gets out of control, especially in difficult conversations. Think of a conversation that you had to end a personal relationship, or you had to fire an employee. In this type of conversation, it is difficult to maintain reason. That is why you need to be attentive. Whenever you notice that emotion is speaking louder, stop, breathe, and try to regain reason. Return to the course that you had defined in your preparation step. In some cases, emotion speaks so loudly that it is not worth continuing the conversation at that particular moment. In these situations, the best thing is to say exactly, look, I see that the conversation is not being productive. We are very emotional. Let's end here and come back to talk calmly tomorrow. Note that even when you're ending an unproductive conversation, your communication needs to be assertive. No leaving the conversation or stopping without saying what you're thinking. Don't run away. Be clear at all times. Only then you have the assertiveness that is so lacking in conversations. Being able to communicate assertively is one of the most important skills that you can learn to improve your personal and professional relationships, as well as the conversation that you have with yourself. Assertive communication is especially important when you have to be dealing with difficult conversations in which you need to say no with confidence and avoid misunderstandings. So for those of you who are interested in communicating in a productive way, now I want to invite you to check the How to Say No training by going to the address arata.se/how to say no.